Well, I'm with the great, venerable, and if I can also say one of the great mentors I've had in the sport of boxing is Jerry Izenberg. He's in Las Vegas now. He joins me 70 years as a sports writer and still going strong. Jerry, it's wonderful to see you, first of all.
It's wonderful to be seen by anybody. I'm 90.
Thank God I'm not sitting in bed interviewing you tonight, because do you remember a few years ago when I was interviewing you and I fell asleep while we were doing the interview because it was so late at night in the UK?
I tell you, if you had been awake, I would have fallen asleep.
No, but I remember you always tell people the story that Gareth was talking to me about the Rumble in the Jungle. We were celebrating the 40th anniversary or something, and he said, suddenly I heard him snoring.
That's a true story. Not only that, but I hung up in a rage, and you called me back 20 minutes later and said, I'm sorry, and then you went back to sleep again.
At least I'm sitting in a chair tonight.
Okay.
Congratulations on the great book. And the purposes of talking to you today are twofold, really. One is to talk about some of your recollections of a man they call the greatest boxer of all time, a man called Sugar Ray Robinson, but also, as your house guest just disappears behind you, but also to talk about March the 8th, 1971, 50 years on we are from the first ever, the fight of the century, when it was the richest prize in sport to be heavyweight champion in the world, literally the richest prize in sport, between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. Now, you obviously covered that entire build-up in real detail. Tell us what your recollections are about that, because you've got a book out about it as well, which is extraordinary and is so detailed.
Well, it's kind of an amazing thing. There was a lot of tension, which I really didn't understand until much later, because Joe had loaned Ali money when he was out of work. Joe had gone to the commission and asked if they would give him back his license. But it got to be very testy, and after the third one with the gorilla thing, they never made up. I don't care what people say, they never made up. The buildup got to the point where he was trying to get the fight. They wanted him to get it because that's why he had to rush through Quarry and Bonavina to get it eventually, because they were afraid he was going to jail. They wanted to get the fight in before he went to jail. It was a matter of money for everybody but him. But she goes to Philadelphia to try to taunt Joe Frazier a little more, gets on a radio station, calls him an Uncle Tom, goes to the Joe Frazier gym, bangs on the window and says, come out, sucker, come out right now, we'll settle it here, come out. Well, Joe, you don't do that. Joe is headed for the door. And yanked Durham, then the manager put a stranglehold on his neck and said, you ain't going anywhere. He said, the fight of the century ain't going to happen on a side street across from a railroad station in Philadelphia. You sit where you are. And they made a lot of money because he did.
Was it about $5 million, $2.5 million each, I recall?
Something like I can't, when you get above $150, I have trouble visualizing. So, but basically, it was a record at that time. And to be eclipsed, of course, by what they paid Frazier and what they paid Ali and Foreman. But it was tough, you know. You knew it was coming. You got to understand America at that time. I wish I could forget it, but I have to remember it. It was totally divided. I mean, it was the worst I'd seen it divided since pre-World War II, when the Klan and the German-American Bund made an agreement, and they took over my father's tombstone and put a swastika on it, my grandfather's, and drew a swastika. I learned about anti-Semitism then. I was 7. But it's any anti-anything. We were divided about Vietnam. That was the issue. You know, younger people think the issue was Frazier and Ali. Trust me, the issue was Vietnam. And roughly a year before that fight, hippies and hard hat construction guys were fighting in Times Square, of all places, pipes and baseball bats. I mean, it was horrible. Well, also people began deciding they're choice of the fighter they were going to root for was based on the war. Ali had no quarrel with them Vietcong, she said. So 70% of the command, maybe 65% of the country was rooting for Ali. The other 45 were rooting for Frazier. And basically it was over the war. But that night in the arena, I would say 70% of the crowd was pro-Ali, because the pro-Ali people were New Yorkers and they had the money and they went to the fight. Well, you know, the fight itself was fantastic because of the emotion and because of the crowd, but really not because of the fight. Now, I don't care what anybody else says. I'm my own judge. I use my own scorecard. Joe Frazier won that fight, won it by a couple of rounds. Ali is told going out for 15. Remember, Ali had the leg off. He's really not the Ali we knew. He's told, look, you got to knock that sucker out or you're going to lose this fight. So they go out for round 15. Ali had this habit all through my life. We were friends for 50 years, long after boxing. And everything I knew about, he could turn the clock back for 20 seconds and you'd swear you were sitting back in 1961, 1974. But when it got down to 17 seconds, everything went out the window. So he comes out, left, right cross. He's punching the hell out of Frazier. Frazier is still Frazier. He's moving in. Frazier never backed up. Well, a week after the fight, Joe and I sat in his gym, and he told me that Ali was screaming at him in the ring. I believe Joe, because many times I've heard Ali scream in the ring. He used to say, don't say that about me. I don't talk in the ring. I'm all business. Yeah, he's all business. He's so much into the fight, he doesn't know how much he's talking. Anyway, he's screaming, he's throwing these punches, these great punches at Frazier. And he's screaming, and he says, he's throwing his punches at Frazier, and he's screaming, and he says, fall, fool, don't you know you must fall? God has ordained that I will be the heavyweight champion forever. And when he says that, Frazier slips inside after he misses a punch, and out comes the left hook, which had a life of its own. I don't even think Joe controlled it. And he clocks him, and he yells back at Ali, well, God's going to get his ass whipped tonight. That, so help me, that came from Frazier, who repeated, and I believed it. So that's how the fight ended. Then Ali goes on television, convinces everybody in America he won the fight, political decision, robbery, and Frazier's in the, look, he's in a hospital. I'm out here. I'm still unmarked. I'm beautiful. I won the fight. And yeah, Ali, you won the fight. You won the fight. Well, I go down to Philadelphia to see what Joe thinks about that. I walk into the gym, and there's a floor-to-ceiling picture of Ali on his ass and Frazier turning to go to a neutral corner. And I said, you didn't waste any time, did you? He said, I don't want to waste any time today. I want to tell you what really happened. We're going to go get sandwiches, and then we'll have lunch here, and we'll talk about it. So we go down to get sandwiches, and the gopher goes into order. Another gopher is standing with us. 3 little black kids come running down the hill. I got to guess 8 years old. And they're yelling, Joe Frazier, Joe Frazier, Joe Frazier. He likes that. He says to the other gopher, go inside the car, get me 3 autograph pictures, hurry up. He gives the pictures to the kids. And they look at him, and then one kid suddenly says, my daddy says Muhammad Ali was drugged. Frazier, who's a very dark man, I swear turned white, gets down on his knees. So there's the 2 heads, the 8-year-old and his head are about that far apart. And he says, you go home and you tell your daddy he's right. He was drugged. I drug him with a left hook. And he throws the left hook in the air, and the 3 kids run away. Then he turns to me, and he looks at me, and he says to me, asks me a question. And it's a question that plagued the entire rest of his life. He said, you saw it, you know it happened? What I got to do? Tell me, what the hell I got to do? And that same shadow smothered him and smothered Holmes for the rest of their lives.
Jerry, fantastic story. Jerry, we are on the cusp of potentially watching Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. It's obviously a massive fight for Great Britain because it's just so enormous. It's the richest fight we've ever had. At the time, the fight we're talking about really did resonate hugely globally as well. I mean, how big was that compared to perhaps what we're going to see now with Fury and Joshua?
It dwarfs it. It absolutely dwarfs it because of the emotions involved, really the strong emotions. You're not getting those emotions in the United States on our end of the fight. I mean, they'll watch the fight, they'll buy it, you know. But there's still a lot of disbelief in the American. And, you know, something really, I'm an old guy, and so maybe maybe I'm shaped by other fighters I've seen over the years. The challenger or the American, his footwork is horrible. When he has to back up, it's really bad. He's awkward. He slips. He's this. He's that. He carries with him a punch that I dare say might be the best right hand since Marciano.
Yeah. So who are you talking about now?
I'm talking about the challenger, the American.
But
you asked me about the fight, and it's going to be in England.
No, I'm asking about
and I'm Fury. Why it doesn't resonate the way Ali-Frazier did.
Right.
We had the two best fighters on the planet.
Yeah.
And when they were the two best, not in the first fight, but when it's Ali was Ali again, Frazier was always Frazier. Manila was the test. And if you don't mind my saying this, Manila was like watching a Wall Street graph. Ali's ahead, Ali's behind. Ali's ahead, Ali's behind. No knockdowns, and a great fight. Why no knockdowns? A great referee. The Ali people who wanted Zach Clayton, who did the Foreman fight, and they felt, well, we might give him a little bit of a break. The Frazier people had their own guy, and they were sure would give them a little bit of a break. So they come up with the same story at the rules meeting. No Filipino is big enough and strong enough to break these fighters. In comes the head of the boxing commission, colonel in the army, whatever, reaches in his pocket, puts a 45 on his holster, puts a 45 down on the table and says, I understand there's some debate about who will referee this. Let's settle it now. And he puts his hand on the gun. A Filipino will referee this fight. Then they bring in the referee. Well, the argument goes out the window. Roman Gabriel, a great American quarterback, he's about 6'4", was the tallest, heaviest Filipino I ever saw in my life. This guy was almost as big. His name was Sonny Padilla. And when the fight started in Manila, first thing Ali had a habit, he'd stick his glove behind your head, behind your neck, pull you down as he threw an uppercut, right? He did it once, and Sonny said to him, the next time it's a point, the second time you're out of the building. Wow. Joe then hits him after the bell. Not after the bell, he hits him below the waist.
Yeah.
Well below the waist, I might add. Joe, point off next time it happens. 2 points. Next time it happens after that, you're out of the building. Not a single foul the rest of the fight, and very few clinches. And they went, I mean, it was a nightmare, because I was sitting between Dave Anderson of the New York Times and Jerry Liska from the Washington Post, who also at one point worked for The Sun in London, a very good man. And we traveled together, like in horse racing, we were 1 and 1A. We always traveled together. So I'm sitting between them and we're watching the fight. And I say to Jerry, about round 12, I think they should stop this fight. I think they should declare both of them winners. Nobody should ever lose this fight. And let's all go home before something really bad happens. Well, it was happening, okay? So now it was so dynamic. Somewhere around the 12th or 13th round, Frazier's eyes now are closing because he always fought in a crouch, as you know, Gareth. And he had to straighten up to see, because the jab was doing a big job here. And He's standing there now, exhausted, with his hands at his side. His belly is like a beached whale, and his arms, his legs are like wet spaghetti. All Ali has to do is walk 2 feet, maybe 1 foot. Push him, fight's over. Ali couldn't make the walk.
Wow.
Now that 14 ends, they're in the corners, and Joe says to Georgie Benton, the assistant trainer, cut the gloves off. And Joe says, I'll kill you. I'll kill both of you. Don't take these gloves off. I'll never speak to you again. And Eddie puts his arm around and says, Joe, your eyesight is worth more to me and you than this fight. They see it in the other corner once the gloves get cut. They tell Ali. Ali gets up. Now, the story a lot of people in Ali's camp will give you is that people were jumping in the ring, and he didn't want to get hurt, so he fell down to the floor to protect himself. I guarantee you, he couldn't walk another 5 feet. And Frazier, of course, was living on oxygen, on oxygen and anger alone, because he really was out of it too.
Joe,
So they bring Ali up the aisle to the dressing room, and he's leaning on the fighter, on his people in his corner. And he leans over and he says to Anderson and me and to Lister, that's the closest you will ever see to death. And he walks away, and I say to Lister, I don't want to see anything any closer.
Yeah.
Well, now the fight's over. I got a big 40 minutes to write a column, not a story, but a column. And I hate to do this, but it's not to brag, it's to tell you what I think. This is what I wrote at the beginning of that column. Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier did not fight for the championship of the WBC last night here in Manila. They did not even fight for the championship of the planet. What they fought for, they could have fought the way they fought in a telephone booth on a melting ice floe, because they were fighting for the championship of each other.
So well put.
And the last sentence in that paragraph was, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not settled now, it'll never be settled.
Wow, amazing. If I can just finally just take you back to the first fight. I mean, obviously, that's an incredible account of Manila and the termination, the culmination, the denouement of their trilogy. You talked about how it captured America. Because we're waiting, the fight between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, which is my time now. That's really captured public imagination. It's taking a long time for it to sign. Even though they're 50 years apart, are these fights the total equivalent of each other?
I do not think so. I just can't. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be over at the sports book betting on a fight. I think not. Going in, knowing both fighters' abilities. With the American,
there isn't an American in that fight though, because
I'm sorry, I've got the.
That's why I keep correcting you. We've got Anthony Joshua, the Brit.
Yeah, I know.
And Tyson Fury, the Brit.
Oh, Tyson Fury. I bet.
You're thinking about Wilder.
I'm thinking about Wilder. No, I apologize for that. I absolutely. I guess you were supposed to fight him so many times. I never did. But I really think, in terms of Great Britain, it's probably a little bigger, because emotions are aroused for different reasons. I know there are a lot of people who never accepted the champion because his past and this and that, but they're wrong. He was great knocking out Wilder. Not good, great. And there are a lot of people who just don't give the other guy the credit. They find a flaw in Joshua, a flaw here, a flaw there. And you know something? Boxing has never had perfect combatants. If you think not, say, well, let me try professional boxing for a month or so, and I'll go get hit in the face a few times. And, it's just like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan till they get hit in the mouth.
Who,
And
who do you favour out of Fury and Joshua when they do meet?
if you put a gun in my mouth and make me make a pick, because I honestly have a lot of thinking to do about this fight and a lot of tapes to look at. If Wilder is the Wilder, I keep saying Wilder.
I know
because I don't think he's a good fighter. All right, let's go back. If the Giant is the Giant who fought Wilder,
yeah, the Gypsy King, yeah,
he wins this fight. Now, if he has, I don't know what hobbies he's acquired or not gotten rid of during the interim. It's a long time between. I don't know. I haven't seen either fighter in the gym. I don't know anything about it. The other guy was improving. You know when I thought Joshua would be a good fighter? When it first occurred to me, I thought, okay, we're back to it again. The way that was described to me by your colleagues, not by you, but by your colleagues, before the Ali fight against the Hungarian Joe Bugner, yeah. Before the Bugner, they were saying to me, "You'll be surprised. He can move. He can fight. You're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised." So after the fight, I asked these same fellows, whom I will not embarrass by naming, I asked them, "Well, what did you think of the fight?" He said, "Just another Hungarian." and that, we were used to disappointments among English fighters. We were, until Lennox came along. We really were. So I saw little flaws in Joshua, I thought, but when I thought maybe, just goes back a way, just maybe I got this wrong, he's fighting Klitschko. He gets knocked on his ass.
Yeah.
And he's fighting him a little bit differently in the subsequent rounds.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, yeah, Klitschko took him to school, but he took his notebook there. He looks like he might really be able to develop into what we know he has developed into. I'm impressed by both of them, but also in spurts. Gareth, I have to apologize. I'm not by hedging this fight, but...
all right, you've watched Tyson Fury, and we've been at some of his fights together in America. Yeah. Certainly the one in Vegas, you were there. Would Tyson Fury have lived with Muhammad Ali in the ring?
Would he have beaten him?
Yeah.
You're asking me? I don't think so. Well, the Tyson Fury who fought look, with all respect to all the English writers and all the English boxing fans and all the English and the British, okay. With respect to all of them, I see one fight in Tyson. I mean, I keep saying Tyson Fury. Yeah. I see one fight, and it's blocking up my mind because it's the fight that he was a great fighter that night.
Against Wilder, the second fight. Yeah.
And if he can, I thought he would win the second fight, by the way, because of the way he finished the fact that he did finish the first fight.
Then he got up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he fought him, didn't he? He
fought him. Oh, he was fighting at the end.
Yeah.
But the second fight, nobody who's fighting today would have beaten him then. And that second fight, nobody. But, and it's a big but, does he still have it? Like I say, I don't like to make predictions or things like that when I don't know anything about it. I don't know what's happened to Tyson since he left the ring.
He stayed in the gym. He's 19.5 stone. He stayed in good shape. But by the time he fights Joshua, who fought in December, Fury will have been out probably for 18 months, since that Wilder fight. Because it's a year ago now.
It's what happens in the gym, but you don't win fights in the gym. No, but the heavy bag doesn't hit back, and no fight has ever been won in the gym that I know of. You got to go out and do it.
Yeah.
The greatest gym fighter I ever saw in my life was the Olympic champion, Rademacher. But every time you rang a bell, the fight was over.
Jerry, I know you've got to do lots of other interviews today about your book, and I want to ask you about the great Sugar Ray Robinson before you go. And it is wonderful to see you, and you are in incredible shape. Your mind is extraordinary for 90 years of age, because I know you cover loads of other sports, 50 Super Bowls and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah. 54 Kentucky Derbies.
Exactly.
feel very strongly about Sugar Ray Robinson. I saw him at the end of his career, his very last fight against Joey Archer in Pittsburgh, and I wanted to cry for him, you know. And before that, he fought a guy, a Canadian, in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and it was gone. But the thing about Sugar Ray Robinson is the best way to sum him up. They had a night to honor him at the Garden. I forget the main event. So they have this, and now what happens is I'm walking over to Leone's Italian restaurant because that's where whenever you covered event in the Garden, you went to Leone's afterwards. I'm walking there, and ahead of me is a well-built Afro-American. He could have been a fighter one day for all I know. And he's got his arm around a little boy's shoulder and said, help me, this is a true story. And he said, you see that man that got in the ring and everybody shook his hand? And the little boy said, yeah, who was he? And he said, his name is Sugar Ray Robinson. He said, and son, one night think back about this fight because you just saw the greatest fighter who ever lived. Hey, I can't top that.
How good was he? Just tell us, what did you see of him? Obviously, he had stopped in the late 60s and he was in his pomp in the kind of early 50s. What did you, obviously he's an extraordinary character inside and outside the ring.
There's 2 fights with the Englishman.
With Randolph Turpin, yeah.
Yeah, he lost a fight.
Randy Turpin, yeah.
He lost a fight, and he came back and won it in New York.
Yes.
And his eye was closing, and all he had to hear from Arthur McCanty, who I believe was a referee, was, hey, I'm giving you this round, but I'm going to look at you very closely. He knocked him out. Ray Turpin. So I just, you know, he reminded me a lot of Archie Moore. I'm not saying that it was corrupt, but I am saying they often got disinterested in opponents. And so as a result of that, they were loaning their title to somebody who beat them when they were sort of half fighting. But they always won the rematch. Yeah. And his movements were just spectacular. And he was a guy among Afro-Americans, among Black people in New York, in Harlem. He was a guy who was maybe even a hair more popular than Ali in Harlem. That pink Cadillac was parked in front of his bar, yeah. And if he was not there, it wasn't there. But if the pink Cadillac was parked, people came rushing to the bar. If I got enough money to buy a drink, I want to see Ray. I want to see Sugar.
Did you ever go to the bar? Did you ever go to Ray Robinson's?
No, I never did.
Why not? Did you wish you had now?
Oh, I sure do. I wish I did. I wish I'd seen the end of the Cain Abel fight, but the beginning of it. But my camel broke down on the way to the ring, and it was, you know, I only saw half a fight, so I can't say.
Because you would have been in your 30s then, presumably, when that was open, or not? Was that earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe in your 20s then, you know?
Yeah, but, you know, I didn't have the latitude. I didn't start writing the column. I was the youngest column on a major paper in the country when I was 32. And
58 years ago. So, you know, you're talking, I can't do my math.
I was a kid.
You're talking 59.
No, actually, my math might be wrong. It was 1962. It was August of 1962. Yeah. I left the Herald Tribune in New York, went back to the Star Ledger in New Jersey as its featured columnist. And then I never held, except for the wartime, I never held another job. I've been with the paper about 62.
It's extraordinary. If Ray Robinson was around today, because I'm doing kind of comparison for Ring Routine, if he'd been around today with social media and these millions of followers that people have, would he have been one of the world stars today, Ray Robinson?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He had the aura of stardom and everything about him. He was a fighter who could give great interviews. He had a very engaging smile and laugh. Break into a tap dance, which he could do professionally. When he skipped rope, I mean, the gym stopped. Not when he sparred, when he skipped rope.
Wow.
he had the aura, and the only thing he had was, like I said, an occasional lack of interest in an opponent. He thought he could. Look, when he came to fight Turpin, he came with about 12 people, which in those days was not done. One of them was his barber. I mean, that's.
I spoke to Colin Hart about this, and he had his barber. He brought the pink Cadillac. He came on a boat, the SS France.
Yeah.
He obviously went on tour fighting in Europe, didn't he? And he had his porter, his butler, his barber, his dresser, his suit carrier. I mean, apparently,
everybody.
Apparently, it was 23 people he brought with him. Sometimes, you know.
It probably was, but he just. You know, I don't think he didn't take Turpin seriously the first time. I really don't believe he did. Turpin was a good fighter. I'm not denigrating Turpin, but he wasn't Ray Robinson. Nobody was Ray Robinson.
Jerry, I was only given a certain amount of time with you. Anyone that's watching this, Jerry Izenberg's book, Once There Were Giants, The Golden Age of Heavyweight Boxing, of which the 1971 fight between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, the first of the trilogy, features as one of the chapters. Jerry, it's out in paperback in April. Please buy the book. Jerry was a close friend with both Ali and both Frazier, as we heard there. You became friends.
I'm the only one left alive of the three.
Yeah, exactly. And you are the only one left alive. And I'm so delighted that you are. It's a pleasure to see you today. And I look forward.
Gareth, despite my big mouth, I like being with you.
You too. And
don't push it. Don't push it too much.
I will not, sir. Cannot wait to be with you live in person in Las Vegas very soon.
Good. You got it.
Thanks very much, Jerry.
Oh, please.